Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shine at PTV World. Now we all understand the fact that Pakistan does have a very substantive youth bulge, and in this regard if you were to then quote the figures, we also understand the fact that nearly 2/3 of the Pakistani population is that which is under the age of 30. Now considering that we do have this substantive youth population, it's very important to sit back and actually analyze the fact that have we as a society, or have we not for that matter, been able to harness the potential of the same. And this is something upon which we'll be shedding light today. Overall, we'll not only be talking about youth activism, we'll also be talking about youth development. More particularly, we'll also be talking about the critical intersection between the two and how this in turn has actually impacted youth policy making or policy making generally too. In this regard, we'll also be talking about the fact that how do we see young people in Pakistan not only advocating for various social causes, be it that of climate change, be it for that matter gender equality, or for that matter even mental health awareness, and to what extent do we actually see young people by virtue of the youth activist movements actually making substantial change too in this regard. All of this today, that too with a very eminent panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for the show today is Ms. Anam Sadiq, who's not only a Fulbright scholar, she's also an educator. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Alongside her, I have Ali Zain Raza, who's an analyst. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam ji. Thank you for having me on the show.
You're most welcome. And my third panelist for the show today is Ms. Hania Rifat, who's a youth activist. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam Fatma, it is a pleasure.
You're most welcome. Now to get the conversation started with you, Anam, in a society where perhaps a lot of women might complain that their access to information is limited, that their access to online spaces is something which has shrunk over a period of time, how do you then as a young female entrepreneur run this edtech platform where you're actually ensuring that not only young boys but also young women have that access to education?
You're absolutely right in pointing out that women have been marginalized, especially when it comes to tech spaces. So just to give you a stat, when my company raised funding, only 2% of the funding that was coming to Pakistan was for female-led entrepreneurship ventures, and my company was one of them. We were well lucky. However, there needs to be more done to support women who are business leaders, who are entrepreneurs on ground. Now, having said that, my gender also worked in my favor, because you see in education right now, there are a lot of girls who are left behind. Traditionally, they may not have access to classrooms in a gender segregated environment. However, a tech-enabled platform gives them access that they traditionally wouldn't have had.
Right.
So my being a woman has been an inspiration. When I go on field, I work with community schools, I mentor parents and community leaders to send their girls into as well.
Although very frankly, we have seen this in itself could possibly turn out to be a double-edged sword too. But moving on, when we talk about this particular edtech, for the clarification of the audience, tell us, you've also been working with the government in this regard too.
That's right.
How is it working to empower somebody who's trying to seek an education? Because from what we understand, it not only makes the whole process more fun, more engaging that way, but it also has that long-term impact with regards to a child's learning outcomes.
So I think right now we have to leapfrog traditional constraints that come in when you have to build a school. You need a lot of infrastructure, and finances. And then you need an army of teachers to train these millions of children that are out of school and get them up to a high quality standard. So in this way, the tech is tremendous breakthrough, right? You can leverage a quality teacher who's sitting in, say, Lahore, and then give access to students in a more rural community such as Sahiwal. So through the app, we've got about 500,000 downloads on it. Students are studying. Just last year, 7 million questions were attempted on it. We have about 500 million plus views on it, which shows the appetite the youth has towards learning. Now, the students who don't have access to smartphones or the internet, we also cater to them.
Right, Anam, your point is noted. We will talk about this, but during the later half of the show. But coming towards you here, we must talk about youth activism per se. Now, we understand the fact that whenever we do talk about youth activism, activism is something which has always existed. Even if you go back into the history, we see the civil rights movement that in itself was also led by young people. And in Pakistan too, we see in ways more than one, young people leading so many important social justice movements. But to what extent do you feel, Ali, have these movements on ground actually translated into positive, concrete change?
Fatma, so essentially, as you have rightly pointed out initially, that about 60% of Pakistan's population constitutes of young people. And that is a huge resource for any country if they want to turn things around essentially. Now, talking about the movements and the youth activism in particular, I believe right now there are a number of individuals who at a very smaller scale and gradually they are growing over time as soon as they get the support of various NGOs. Their project probably starts as a seedling and eventually it grows out into a plant, because right now most of the projects that we see here in Pakistan, particularly which are focused or aimed at rendering the community service, they are mostly youth-led projects.
Right. Ali, and in this regard, we also have seen that people, especially those who do belong to the marginalized groups, especially younger people who might perhaps be, differently abled, they've also made their mark this way. Just recently, we also saw this whole movement where this young petitioner, Sana Khurshid, she filed a petition with the Lahore High Court, a consequence of which is that we now have a law for differently abled people in Punjab.
Certainly, and I believe that it is because of the legal awareness campaigns that have been running around, and that is the reason why people make use of such initiatives such as the public interest litigation, where they can actually seek justice for the marginalized communities.
Right.
And I believe the example that you just gave is one of the brilliant examples in that
That's
regard.
right. I'll come to you, Hania, and here we must take your narrative too. Now, I understand that you have been working with the World Bank, particularly focusing on gender equality. Gender equality, as we all understand, is extremely important when we do talk about the success of any movement, because it is a very important underlying issue that we need to address as a society. So, in the course of conducting all these researches, where do you feel does the problem lie when it comes to ensuring that we do have gender equality, not only in laws and policies, but in practice too?
During the course of my research project with the World Bank, I came across 8 different areas. I was able to identify 8 different areas in which basically women are lacking, or there is a significant gender gap. So we can start with accessibility or mobility. So when it comes to accessing or reaching out to workspaces, reaching out to avenues and platforms where women can contribute productively towards development, towards the economy, towards any profession or whatsoever activity, there is a significant gap in mobility. Then we move towards workplaces, and we need to identify, and this is what the World Bank is basically working on as well, that in the workplaces, in the formal economic sector, there are significant laws that either need to be enacted from the start in different countries, including Pakistan, or there has to be better implementation of laws to make sure that gender equality is achieved at the workplace level.
Implementation is something on which I would want you to deliberate further, because we see that we do have a lot of pro-women laws in Pakistan as we speak. The problem again comes to the implementation. So when it comes to the society at large, what are the societal attitude changes? What are those behavior changes that must be made on part of the society so as to be able to better implement these laws, so as to ensure that yes, we do bring women, more particularly young women, in the mainstream?
So views on marriage are also part of the World Bank project, and they try to assess that how after marriage or how marriage and parenthood subsequently impact women's agency or women's involvement in the economy. And we've seen that marriage and parenthood, attitudes about marriage, how marriage is seen to be an institution that can constrain women, or that can be restraining in a way that they're not allowed to pursue their professional lives after marriage, is a significant barrier when it comes to gender equality and development. And at the same time, parenthood, not having enabling structures or not having an enabling environment for women to pursue properly their professions, their careers after marriage, is also an attitude we need to change.
And access to basically education, which is everybody's fundamental right as per the Pakistani Constitution, on which I'll take you on board. Here, of course, your narrative as an educationist becomes extremely important too. So when we do talk about ensuring that everybody does get that right, more particularly young children, Pakistani youth, how do you ensure that people get that access to information, to education too for that matter, in the more far-flung areas of the country? Because there perhaps might be areas where people might not even be able to access the internet. So if they can't access the internet, then how can they actually access the educational platform that you are so offering?
Absolutely, you're right in pointing out that there is a digital divide. But what needs to be put in perspective is the fact that Pakistan is the fastest growing app market in the world. So we are growing leaps and bounds when it comes to digital penetration, internet availability, etc. However, having said that, I do realize having devices is a privilege that not many people have. So what we do is that we partner with governments and we work with community schools that have literally a budget of say 4,000 rupees to run an entire school which has an average population of 60 children in it. And there's differentiation, right? There's a student of class 1 and a student of class 5. All have to be served within that limited budget. So we work with them, we convert their classrooms into a hybrid learning environment, and then we stream live online classes to them which have a two-way interaction component, and we keep at the heart of it student success. So we're constantly doing monitoring and evaluation to see how well the students are performing, how they're taking up this digital
The evaluation
initiative.
process is continuous, and it should be sustained that way as well, because you need to continuously evaluate, you know, whether people are reaching their goals or not. But Ali, when we talk about activism here, because we understand all these issues at a very core level, they are interrelated. So when we do talk about youth activism, to what extent do you feel do factors like one's gender, do factors like one's socio-economic class, or even for that matter access to the digital world, they in themselves impact one's ability to make a lasting impact?
So essentially, I believe that all of these factors, they do have a huge role to play when it comes to ensuring the success of the youth activism at the end of the day. Because activism starts somewhere, but in order to gain momentum and in order to make its impact and in order to achieve its objectives. So for instance, if one person has started a movement or one person has started an initiative, it needs to reach out to the public so that they can essentially benefit from it.
Right, Zain. On which I'll come to you, Hania, and here I would want you to comment on this further. So when we do talk about various movements, or for that matter various momentums that of course the young people in Pakistan have been working on, and more particularly in this regard youth activism per se, we do see that at least in the West we did see young, you know, activists like Greta Thunberg working so as to make a change with regards to, you know, taking climate change more seriously. She was that one person who actually led that climate activism movement. But when the same comes to Pakistan, what role have young Pakistanis played so as to highlight this very issue, both in terms of ensuring that, you know, Pakistan works towards climate mitigation as well as climate adaptation?
Right. So after 2019's speech of Greta Thunberg at the UN summit, a lot of young people in Pakistan also got motivation to hold their leaders to account when it comes to climate resilient adaptation mechanisms. And the turning point have been the flash floods of 2022. Now there are more than 76,000 initiatives that have been taken at rural and at urban level. Most of them are being led by youth activists that are focusing on building climate resilient societies. One very important factor that we need to take into consideration right now, that is when we're talking about adaptation mechanisms or climate resilient adaptive mechanisms, vulnerable societies and their perspectives have to be taken in consideration. A very positive initiative that has been taken by these youth climate activists is the organization of COP27 in different cities. So right now COP27 is being organized in different cities of Pakistan, which is being led and completely led by youth. They're collecting very important evidence from vulnerable societies that will ultimately contribute in building a climate policy at the national.
So that's very rightly put by yourself, Hania, because then again we do see examples of young climate change activists also working in Pakistan so as to make a difference in this regard in the Pakistani community too, on which I'll come to you, Anam. Here we must talk about how particularly is your EdTech platform focused on not only educating young people but also ensuring that they have the right skill set when it comes to applying for jobs, when it comes to stepping out practically in the job market. So is your platform working to this effect too?
The youth has an unprecedented opportunity now to access information and make use of amazing tools that are available. And that is why Pakistan is the 4th largest growing freelance economy in the world. But having said that, the youth definitely needs to be trained when it comes to soft skills, when it comes to job readiness, and some more technical skills to be able to compete in a knowledge-based economy globally.
So basically then the focus of your platform is just not to educate them but also to focus on their skill set, and this is something which is extremely important. To which you wanted to add something, Ali, because we also understand the fact that when we do talk about ensuring that young people have the right skill set, here it's very important then to ensure that, you know, young people, they are not only taught to think critically, to question things, but also at the same time they should have that ability to analyze things objectively too, because a lot of times we see that perhaps too many biases might kick in.
Certainly, Fatma, and to that I believe I have shortlisted about 5 essential skills which are quite pertinent when it comes to, you know, empowering the youth in the 21st century. It starts with the critical thinking, and after that communication skills are quite important. Afterwards, there is since we are in 21st century, digital literacy has a lot of or rather a huge role to play in their you know, exposure and all. And in addition to that, I believe adaptability is one of the skills which should be inculcated into them.
Problem solving too.
Problem solving, and given that there are strong ethical foundations as well,
That's
so
so
that the change that they are trying to bring in the society, it doesn't come the other way around.
That's very right. It
Yeah.
has that ethical touch to
Yes,
it, so to
it
speak.
needs to.
But here, do you not feel then it's also very important to talk about the power which social media then has, because a lot of all these youth activism movements, they actually emanate by the powerful and of course by the informed usage of social media too. Now, social media, as we all understand, has helped us actually educate people. But do you not feel that it's very important then to also educate young people so as to be able to use it constructively, whether it is for youth activism, whether it is for advocating for various social causes, or for that matter any other purpose?
Exactly, and just to add to that, I believe that the soft skills development is also part of, I mean, the usage of the social media essentially falls within the soft skills development as well, because social media essentially provides the youth with a tool to project their views, to essentially initiate the movements and make progress with regards to what their ideas are. The social media campaigns at the moment are not really reaping any results because they are not focused, they are not targeted, and in addition to that, even the people who are running them, they do not have the clarity in mind as to what are the objectives that they try that they're trying to
Ali,
achieve.
here one thing that I would like to, you know, add upon here, we have seen social media campaigns at least sparking a debate, at least having that momentum so as to be able to question things, and that in itself, if it is repeated, we have seen it actually bringing about concrete change. We have seen people, we have seen the requisite officials take actions because of things which have been trending, be it on Twitter or even for that matter otherwise. Hania, when we do talk about youth activism, do you not feel that, you know, not one, rather various factors actually dictate the success of any movement which is linked by young people, be it in terms of the age of that strata of the society, be it in terms of the gender, or for that matter in the socio-economic class that they belong to? So to what extent do you feel do these factors contribute towards the success of any youth-led movement?
Even if we look globally and we zoom into the sub-Saharan regions which are generally perceived to be underdeveloped, a research study conducted by the International Labour Organization concluded that 82% of the reforms that were being done at the government level, the vector for that was youth activism. So youth activism employs a variety of tools, and out of those tools, one of them is social media. So social media does in fact help in bringing about a change at policy level even.
Right.
So when we zoom into Pakistan, when we look at 2018's legislation on transgender rights, the movement behind that rights was actually being spearheaded by the youth in collaboration with the transgender population.
Exactly.
In 2022, we saw another instance of the National Youth Commission that was formed at the federal level to address youth-specific issues and work on youth development. That too was a result of youth activism.
Even in the case of, you know, honor killings, if you may remember it a few years ago, this whole new law, the amendment which was passed in the 2016 law of honor killing, that came because of pressure from social media, because of people wanting to have that law. And then we had that Oscar winning movie based on honor killing, because of which again then we saw that that law came. So it is a vicious cycle at the end of the day. But when we do talk about youth activism, and this is something that I would want you to answer, when we talk about it having the right effect, something which Ali also earlier pinpointed towards, to what extent do you feel one's gender or one's socio-economic class can be held responsible so as to ensure the success of any youth activism? Because we also understand the fact, Hania, that not every movement which picks up pace on social media might actually lead to change.
Youth activism and youth-led movements, the barometer for success is the impact that they're creating, and impact can only be created. Youth in isolation, youth in vacuum cannot create any change. It is when they're connected at the national level, at the policy making level, if they have accessibility to those sort of corridors, then only can they push for change. So yes, if you are better placed in a society, be it because of your education, be it because of your economic standing, be it because of your connections, you're in a better place to bring forth the sort of change that you want.
Right, Hania, on which I'll come to you, Ms. Anam, and moving towards the end of the show, we understand the fact you have been running this very successful EdTech, platform, the purpose of which is, of course, to educate people. But when it comes to, prioritizing the education of young girls, what do you feel are the areas that we need to work upon? Because here again, we need to ensure that young girls, especially those who belong to the remote and, to the rural areas of the country, they have that access to education. Their access to education is something which is not hampered. So are you in any regard also working on educating the parents per se?
Yeah, that's a very important component of our work, because what we have to do is change the narrative, change the stereotypes, in fact break them. So the stereotype that if a woman is working, if a girl is working, if a girl is educated, it means she will not be a good homemaker. That narrative needs to really break. And for that we need role models to step up. We need women, like we have today, to showcase how that these women are bringing positive change to the society. In fact, I think women are Pakistan's greatest untapped potential, because once they contribute to the labor force, there's a lot of achievements that can result on a national level. So once our leaders are aligned on bringing women to the forefront, I think there's a lot of policy reform that can happen, that can structure women to be in that front row position that I think they deserve to be.
Although we do see a lot of women now, at least in top decision making powers, we do see 2 sitting Supreme Court justices, both of whom are female, at of course the highest court in the country too. And then we also see that in a lot of professions where typically were dominated by men, there is greater inclusion and representation of women too, on which I'll come to you, Ali. And here we must talk about overall working to make youth empowerment a reality in the country. So in this regard, as an analyst, do you feel, is it the policies that we need to work upon, is it the system that we need to ensure is more enabling, or do you feel that the youth here, the young people themselves, they need to be very forthcoming in this regard? Because if we were to analyze, it is a combination of everything.
Certainly, Fatma, and I would like to answer this question in a threefold manner, starting with the role of the government. They have a very crucial role to play in this regard, and they need to take the youth on board, particularly form public-private partnerships in order to promote the soft skills development, in order to run the awareness campaigns, and in order to develop the youth and to tap their potential, who are right now at the 60%, and they can certainly change things around for Pakistan. Secondly, as far as the private parties are concerned, such as the educational centers, such as our universities, not only focusing on the educational aspect of the students, but rather giving them the practical education, because imparting practical education is more than necessary in today's time and age, because right now the complexities of the system that we are all navigating through, it can not only be solved by if somebody is only literate, but rather if someone is also practical.
And one thing that I would want to add here, that's very rightly put by yourself, that here we also need to focus upon character development, because education per se might perhaps get you good grades, it might get you that admission into the university or college that you want to go to, but that character, that ethical consideration, that grooming of one's personality, that is something which just doesn't come from studying in the four corners of a classroom. So these are the things that we need to work upon. But coming towards you, Hania, and before we conclude today's show, so why do you feel, as a youth activist yourself, since we all understand that you have been very actively advocating for causes more than one, it is so important then to give young people a seat at the decision making table? And this is something which is definitely discussed in the Western jurisdictions too, because I do remember that when Greta Thunberg, she started this whole climate justice movement, she was criticized for being young. People did not take her seriously just because she was a teenager. So why is it so important to give young people that right to actually voice their opinions without being discriminated against or stigmatized?
The biggest stakeholders in today's time and age, not only in Pakistan but globally as well, are youth. Pakistan's majority of the population basically are the youth. So if a policy is being devised at the federal level or at the provincial level, it is going to impact the youth. And if the biggest stakeholders are not included in the policy making or in the policy consultation process, eventually the policy will miss the youth perspective. And we've seen that because the youth perspective has been missed so often, that a majority of Pakistani youth are now considering greener pastures abroad, and this is the famous recently, like
Of
very
course,
very
and that which again leads us back to the problem of not
Brain
only
drain.
brain drain, but also on the contrary, we also seen youth unemployment too. Because you see, at the end of the day, these are things which are very interrelated, and people want to move out of Pakistan because of a lack of employment opportunities that they can't possibly have here in Pakistan. Right, your point is noted, on which note I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Ms. Anam. Thank you so much, Ali. And thank you so much, Ms. Hania, for your precious time today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about the ever-evolving role of youth in the Pakistani society. In this regard, we also spoke about the fact that, how have young people in Pakistan actually made their mark with reference to not only advocating for one, rather several social causes, but also how that in turn has actually led to positive social change too. In this regard, the only thing that we do need to remember is the fact that, youth activism shouldn't just merely be taken as, a pursuit of young people. Rather, it is something which should be taken as a profound responsibility. And in this regard, then it is very important for us to ensure as a society that young people are given their say, they are given their respect when it comes to actually voicing their opinions on issues which do matter, more so those issues which actually relate to them. That's it for tonight. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.